Hey, what's happening, everybody? Brent Axe back here on syracuse.com, on the syracuse.com Orange Basketball Facebook page. We are live here tonight after, what a game. You got to say right off the bat, win or loss, that was an entertaining basketball game. It was great to see a high-paced game again, a back and forth, offense. It was like we went back to the 1990s tonight because North Carolina is a team that loves to push the ball. They love to score, and Syracuse kept pace. But some mistakes down the stretch for Syracuse. We'll certainly discuss a questionable call, a questionable shot by Frank Howard at the end after he had a brilliant game against North Carolina. And in a situation like that, those little things, those mistakes at the end are going to cost you against a team who is now the North Carolina Tarheels, won 6 straight games and are really starting to look like a team that could get in that conversation, that could win the national championship, could get to the Final Four, and Syracuse stayed with them the whole way. So let's talk about it, shall we? So Syracuse falls to North Carolina tonight. The final score was North Carolina 78, Syracuse 74. So please like and share this post. Let people know we're here, chat with you here live after the game. If you're watching later on the YouTube replay, appreciate you checking out as well, and would appreciate it if you would share that as well. I want to thank our friends at the Bill Wrap Superstore for sponsoring this. Brian, Bruce, all the guys over there, and gals at Bill Wrap Superstore, big Syracuse fans. So if you get over there in the next couple of days, the Duke game is upcoming. They'll certainly be willing to talk some Syracuse basketball where they make a great deal with you at the Bill Wrap Superstore. What a game. Well, just what a game. I want to start right there. There's a lot of things about this game that, you'd like to have back. Jim Boeheim was pretty short, pretty sweet at his press conference. Not really sweet in a sense, but, pretty direct, pretty short, not really necessarily angry at anything. But, he said, the big thing, when you play a team like North Carolina, who is as efficient a team as I have seen all year in college basketball, they had 29 baskets tonight. They were 29 of 65. 26 of those were assisted by North Carolina. Incredible ball movement, a quick team that just answered everything Syracuse had. Every time Syracuse scored and got back in this game and, looked like and got the crowd back into it and looked like, they were going to give the Tar Heels a run for their money in this thing every single time North Carolina would go down and Theo Pinson would tear apart the Syracuse zone, or Joel Berry would hit a shot, or, Luke May didn't have his best game tonight, but he made a couple of plays, a lot of great passes in this game. So you knew that Syracuse was outclassed in the sense that that's the better team out there. But Syracuse just fought tooth and nail in this basketball game. Tyus Battle, who goes into halftime, 3 of 12. He finishes 9 of 23, but hits 6 shots in the second half. He charges to the hoop and making big plays. Frank Howard, we'll talk about that shot here momentarily, was just brilliant in this game. 5 3-pointers tonight for Frank Howard, 23 points, but it all came down to a few things at the end. Pascal Chukwu, boy, did he have an up-and-down game, right? He was awful at times. The North Carolina defense was just whizzing by him. There was no paint presence there. He could not contain anybody up in the high post, but he starts making rebounds and starts making blocks and giving Syracuse possessions late down the stretch in this game. But he turns the ball over to Joel Berry. O'Shea Brissett took what you would say is an ill-advised shot, tied 70. And then the big play, you come out of a timeout. Now, remember, Frank Howard had hit 5 3-pointers in this game. And if you're going to have somebody shoot, it's really him or Tyus who's going to take the shot in that sense, because O'Shea had just cooled off enough and hit that bad shot right before that. So Jim Boeheim's not going to give him the ball back. It wasn't a good shot. And that's the shame of it, because Frank Howard had such a good game tonight. Frank Howard stepped up big time. And I mentioned this in the last chat that we did and some other places. People have ragged on Frank Howard all year, and I just don't understand that. I understand he makes mistakes at times and turns the ball over, but he plays all 40 minutes. He has the ball in his hand every possession, and all the kid has done the last 2 games, he had 15 points and 6 assists in the last game, comes out tonight and played a near flawless game. But that last shot, that last play, it wasn't good. It wasn't a good shot. It's not what Syracuse needed. You're only down 2 in that spot. It'd be dramatic if he hit that thing and put Syracuse up, and North Carolina would still have a possession. Let's keep that in mind. I mean, Carolina, the way that they score and the way they go up the court and how they are, they could go right back up. But, bottom line, it wasn't a good shot. It wasn't a good shot. But if it's not like it was somebody who had gone 2 for 11 in this game who got the call in that play, or somebody that was having an off night. It was your best player on the court with the ball in his hand, chance to beat North Carolina, 27,000 people going crazy. You need the quality win, top 10. The country's watching. When ESPN worked, that was a lot of technical glitches, unfortunately, from ESPN tonight, but it worked when it mattered. And so I think that is something that people will kind of hang on to here for the next day or two. No rest for the weary, right? Because you got Duke coming up on Saturday. Syracuse is Duke, at Boston College, and Clemson left. And Syracuse absolutely needs to win 2 out of 3 of those games. And, preferably it'd be Duke and Clemson, because those are the quadrant 1 wins. Those are the quality wins. Those are the better teams in the ACC. But it would not be a good idea to add a loss to Boston College on the resume here. So, boy, it is such a tug of war. It has to be. I see what you guys are saying in the comments here. You can't help but compliment the effort of this basketball team. And I don't normally like to do that, because you're supposed to play hard. You're supposed to be a team that goes out and gives you everything that they have, even though there's only 7 players on this team. And I somewhat agree with Jim Boeheim on that you have enough timeouts and enough stoppages in play that fatigue shouldn't be a factor. But the way Carolina just goes up and down the court, and Syracuse was pressing at the end, but Carolina's built to beat the press. They moved so fast it didn't really affect them. They missed some shots when Syracuse went to the press, but I don't necessarily think that was because of the press, right? But I wondered coming into this game. We were talking about this on the radio a lot today, and I've mentioned it in other places and some chats here, that so Carolina loves to just, as you saw tonight, they're as quick and as efficient as any team in the country. And I'm saying, can Syracuse fight fire with fire? Can they do that? Can they run up and down the floor with this team? Or do you try and slow it down? Do you try and get this into a half-court game? Syracuse is, at the bottom of the statistics in the country. It's like 320th in terms of time of possession, because they just, normally play a slower, more methodical game, use the shot clock, defense, that sort of thing. But they played with Carolina tonight. They couldn't quite get over the hump because Carolina is just that good and that efficient, and those mistakes, some of which we mentioned and a few that we haven't yet, will compound and they'll double. It's like being in a boxing match, and you're in the corner, and just when you think you're getting out of that corner, Carolina lands a 1-2 combo and knocks you right back there. But Syracuse kept coming out. I mean, it's one of the older cliches in the book, but it really was like a heavyweight fight out there tonight. Let's see what you guys are saying in the comments here. On this one, Axe, do you really believe Lunardi's wisdom here? Do I believe Lunardi's wisdom on quadrant 1s and where Syracuse sits and where they are? We'll see where he puts them tomorrow. I believe Lunardi, and I believe, because most bracket experts at this point, and I'm going to talk to Patrick Stevens on the Syracuse Sports Podcast tomorrow, so a little hint at what's coming there. He's as good as anybody when it comes to bracketology. They've all got him like either one of the last 4 in or first 4 in, or last 4 out, like right on that cut line, right, the 68th team to get in the tournament. So they're good enough to be in the conversation. This is what you would consider a quality loss. It's a quadrant 1 loss. It's a top 10 team. So I do believe Lunardi's logic in that sense, if that's what you're asking there, Michael, about this team. Do I think Cuse needs to do damage in the ACC tournament? Frank, I don't think it would hurt. I don't think the committee puts as much emphasis on the ACC tournament as some people believe. But what it is, it's that last chance to make an impression. It's the last thing on their minds when they go in that room and they make that decision. But remember, they're looking at a body of work. They're looking at 4 months of basketball, not just 4 days. But if Syracuse can somehow get to the semifinals or even the ACC title game, remember, it's in Brooklyn again this year. And Syracuse traditionally, since moving to the ACC, has not done damage in that tournament. If anything, they lose pretty early in that thing. So I think they need to, from their standpoint, just to go towards the end of the season playing as well as they have right to the end. But in the eyes of the committee, you don't never want to go into a conference tournament having to play well. Conference tournaments are unique situations. You're playing, however long it is, 2, 3, 4 days in a row. But if you beat, let's say a Carolina and lose to Virginia in the title game, something along those lines, how can you not notice that if you're the committee? So I'm kind of half and half on that, Frank, but it certainly wouldn't hurt, especially if they lose 2 of the next 3 as opposed to win 2 of the next 3. yeah, they're going to need the parachute the ACC tournament provides. Mike says Cuse got into the tourney with 13 losses 2 seasons ago. The NCAA is weaker now, so they got a great shot at making it. I mean, they're right on the cut line. You know, every tournament is different. You know, the bubble is some years there's a lot of teams that are deserved to be there. Some years it's just not quite as crazy. The way Syracuse is playing right now, they've got actually they only have 2 quadrant 1 wins because Buffalo is no longer a quadrant 1 win at this point. They moved into quadrant 2, unfortunately. And if you guys aren't familiar with the quadrant system, it's basically they've taken the RPI and by a certain number, you know, so let's say you have a home win based on the RPI between 1 and 30, or a neutral win between 1 and 50 in the RPI, or a road win between 1 and 75. That's quadrant 1. And then the levels go down quadrant 2, 3, 4. I'm actually going to do a video about this that you'll see on syracuse.com, probably tomorrow or Friday, that really explains this whole thing. But bottom line, you need quadrant 1 wins to really feel good about where you are tournament-wise at this point. Tim says they've never won an ACC tournament game. Exactly. Yeah, they've really got to get it going there. Win 2 more games and they're in. Well, I guess it depends what those 2 games are. If you beat Duke, it certainly makes up for the loss that you had tonight. You don't want to slip against Boston College, and then maybe you can get away with that Clemson win. Or, you know, look, a lot of people feel 9's the cut line in the ACC. And with the ACC projected to get about 9 or 10 teams in this thing, I don't know if 9 wins automatically get you in. Remember, once upon a time, and things are different now certainly, but Syracuse got 10 Big East wins one year. We're like, oh, yeah, they're fine now, right? But it didn't really work out that way. Who do you beat? The committee looks at who'd you beat and where'd you beat them. So had Syracuse gotten this win tonight, it would have been huge because it's Carolina and it's a top 10 team. But see, the makeup comes with if you can somehow beat Duke, that's a road win against one of the top teams in the country, and the committee loves that. So it makes up for a lot of some things that haven't been there. So win 2, I guess what it means. I guess what I would ask is what 2 is the best combo there for Syracuse. Certainly beating Duke and Clemson would be the best 2 there. So, yeah, we mentioned how great Tyus Battle played in this game tonight in the second half, making up for a bad first half. Frank Howard, whether you agree with that shot at the end or not, was brilliant. O'Shea Brissett did enough in this game. He wasn't quite as dominant as he's been in recent games. 17 and 10 you'll certainly take from him. But, boy, yeah, that shot that he threw up, that air ball there, those things add up because Carolina's going to go down the other end and they're going to kill you. Add that to the Pascal turnover. And, boy, Pascal, as we mentioned, was just what an enigma he was in this game because he was lost for most of it. And then he's starting to rebound. He's starting to block shots. He's starting to give Syracuse possessions the other way. And then Joel Berry just swipes the ball from him. Pascal didn't really have much of a presence, you know, in that high post area where, boy, you know, Theo Pinson just killed Syracuse in that high post. He sliced that thing up like a hot knife through butter. It was just – and Carolina – that I have not seen a team with better ball movement this year than Carolina. It is amazing how they distribute the ball, how quickly the ball goes around. Bing, bang, boom. That's a team right there. Syracuse just hasn't really played that well this year. It's been a lot more of pass here, pass there, a lot of one-on-one play, and that's what's worked for them because they're just not what Carolina is. But, boy, that's 6 in a row for the Tar Heels now. They're really starting to pick things up down the stretch. They're as good an offensive team as there is in the country. And they get Duke again, of course, in that traditional rival game coming up here. But, man, they look like a team that's starting to peak at the right time of the year and is in the Final Four national championship conversation. I really think they're going to get there at this point, whereas Syracuse, of course, is just trying to get in at this point. Rick says they don't know how to win. Well, you know, they came pretty close tonight against a team that – how many times were you thinking during this game, boy, Syracuse just outclassed here. North Carolina's just better. And they hung in there. They actually outscored North Carolina in the second half of this game. And I think you can't say they did everything they needed to beat Carolina because Carolina's just that good, and those few mistakes will kill you there. But this is a lot better than I thought Syracuse would do if they got dragged into a high-octane game. I'll be honest with you. You know, I'm having a hard time being too critical because, you know, Carolina's just that good, and Syracuse hung in right at the end. But the problem with hanging in is you're in the game, right? And you need the win. And at some point, it's not about an attaboy. It's about you got to make stops. You got to make shots. It's great what you've done to this point, but it's 70-70. You got to make that shot. Pascal Chukwu can't turn the ball over. Is that the best play call you get out of a timeout? It's those things that you don't get that cost you a win against a top 10 team like this. Chris says Moyer didn't really have a stat line, but looked good in his minutes. Yeah, he didn't have much on the stat front tonight. He played 15 minutes. He scored just 2 points, had a couple good hustle plays, a couple good rebounds. I don't think it would be unfair to say they needed more out of him tonight because Barama didn't give you much. He only played 6 minutes in this game. They want much more with Pascal just to get that size in the middle out there, and Barama just wasn't having it. So it's one of those games you kind of needed all hands on deck, and it's not that Moyer didn't do anything, but I think you needed a little bit more from him. Maybe they could have kicked it down to him down low, get a couple more shots out of him, get a couple more offensive plays out of him. But, the last few games, really, Moyer's been there. He's had a presence, but hasn't really, stood out. We haven't even mentioned Merrick Dolezaj yet. He had a very interesting game tonight because you kind of knew that North Carolina was not going to give him the open shots that Miami did and a couple teams prior to that did. He only took 2 shots in this game. And, we'll take a look. So Dolezaj in this game he had 4 points and 5 rebounds. I just want to look at his complete stat line here. So he had 4 points, 5 rebounds in this game. He had 4 fouls, so, at one point was in foul trouble in this one. Played 30 minutes in this game. And, it's interesting because he's kind of an X factor for this team. But you knew that it was the big 3, Tyus, Frank, and O'Shea, that were going to have to kind of lead Syracuse to this. But, boy, if it's tough because, Carolina saw the film of the Miami game, and they're not going to give him those open shots. But if he had been able to get free a little bit for 2 or 3 more possessions and give Syracuse just that much more offense that they needed in this game, in a tight game, who knows? Sometimes X factors and unknown things win games like this. So not a bad game for Merrick Dolezaj, but not quite the overwhelming, behind the back pass, getting open shots, pounding the boards kind of games he's had as of late. Let's see. That's really it. We've pretty much mentioned everybody. A couple of things that really also stood out to me in this game. We mentioned the assists. North Carolina assisted 25 out of their 29 baskets tonight. That's incredible. Syracuse with just 13 assists. The most telltale stat for Syracuse is rebounding. And they did lose the rebounding battle in this game, but just by 4. For a team, North Carolina has averaged at this point. They've averaged beating their opponents in rebounding by 11 rebounds per game. For Syracuse to be within 4, and for Syracuse to actually outshoot North Carolina tonight percentage-wise, there was a time in this game Carolina was shooting like 57%, and Syracuse was at 34%. Syracuse flipped that script in the second half. But I think they were 16 of 23 in the second half, right around there. And they actually outshot Carolina percentage-wise, 45 to 44%. Points in the paint was big, and Theo Pinson, was pretty much all those points in the paint for Carolina, just slipping in there and slipping in there and slipping in there. What did Pinson end up with tonight? It was definitely a career high for him, 23 points, and he was 9 of 12 in this game. Had 6 rebounds, 7 assists for Theo Pinson as well. He's just been on a tear for Carolina lately. Joel Berry, every time North Carolina needed a shot, needed to play, had that steal against Pascal that we mentioned. He ends up with 18 points tonight, just 6 of 17 from the field, but he had 4 3-pointers. And it was the timings. Every time, Syracuse goes up 51-46, or Syracuse, I'm thinking of a few different possessions in this game where Joel Berry would just come down and say, yeah, I don't think so. And we give Carolina just enough edge in this game. Cam Johnson was not a Syracuse killer. You'll recall Cam Johnson, who was at Pittsburgh before transferring to North Carolina. His last 2 games against Syracuse at 24 and 22 points. So he was pretty quiet tonight from that standpoint, but it was really the Pinson and Berry show, and everybody else for Carolina kind of contributed here and there where they could. Casey just says, agreed there. Bruce says, ref took the momentum away from Syracuse. There were some bad calls. There were definitely some bad calls. There was that one call. Let me look it up here while we're yakking about it here. My colleague Donna Datota had a great thought about a call down the stretch here. There was 2 or 3 that really swung North Carolina's way. It seemed like 4 or 5 possessions in a row. So there was one call, as Donna tweeted here, that might or might not have been the right call, but the official blew his whistle before anything happened. There was a couple of plays like that down the stretch where the officials, and I hate when they do this, but they do it. They anticipate calls, and you can't do that. You've got to call what you see. Don't anticipate contact. Don't anticipate calls. So, there were a couple. Did it cost Syracuse the game? Not in any way, shape, or form, because they had a possession at the end where they could have taken the lead, and whether that was the best shot or not, we discussed. But it was enough to notice at this point. What do you guys think of Dan Dockich, by the way, calling the game? Okay, Dan, we get it. North Carolina is good, and they're good at passing the ball. But it was a North Carolina love fest. And I like Dan. I talked to Dan on my radio show today. He's a very outspoken guy, very opinionated guy. He couldn't help but be awed by North Carolina and the way they played. And we got our girl Beth Mullins there from Syracuse, the Syracuse grads. Like, come on, Beth, elbow him, give him something. Counter this North Carolina love, fest that we're getting from the ESPN broadcast. So it was frustrating from that standpoint. It was ESPN's feed cut out a few times. But, a lot of fans were commenting about that in our live chat that we do during the game and on Twitter. And Dockich is a guy who he can rile some people up. He's very opinionated. Go ask people in Louisville what they think of Dan Dockich these days. But it got a little much at times. So that's why I was glad that Syracuse kind of balanced that out and made it a game. He almost was forced to compliment Syracuse as well, because it was getting a little much. Really, North Carolina's got a deep history, and they've gone to a lot of Final Four. Oh, Michael Jordan played there. I didn't know this. Like, come on. Just tell me what's happening right now in this game that we're watching. That got a little much. I like that. I really do. But it laid it on a little too thick there. Usually when people criticize announcers, everybody thinks the announcers hate the home team, right? In this case, though, I think Dockich laid it out a little thick. I got to agree with some people that said that. Chris says Barry and Pinson have been there for what seems like 6 years. They really have. And that's the thing about Carolina. They brought back Joel Barry. They brought back Pinson. They brought back May. They brought back some guys from that national championship team of a year ago. Kennedy Meeks and a couple key players left, of course, and Carolina's always rotating talent. Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, even Syracuse, who's had a first-round pick 6 years in a row, and a few of those have been one and done, right? But to get experienced players back that are key players, that are high scorers like that, and now you're heading into what people feel is an NCAA tournament that is as wide open as we will see, doesn't have too many heavy favorites. You have Virginia, and you have Villanova, and you have teams that are near that conversation. Michigan State, I would also put there as teams that I think are legit national title contenders. But if Carolina keeps this up, you just brought up a great point, Chris, because it's experience. What do you need in the tournament to win? You need great coaching, which they do. You need a rigged major that everybody can take to stay academically eligible, and the NCAA won't do anything about it. Oh, did I just say that? You have, you need guard play. You need experience. You need scoring. And Carolina's got everything. They got everything. Maybe, they can get a little better on the defensive end, but I'd rather take a team that could just score at will like that, as efficient as they are offensively. And there's a lot of good things about Carolina, but that's just it. Everybody has a flaw. Duke, who we'll see on Saturday, of course, is a team that can score at will. They got 5 NBA players in that lineup when Marvin Bagley plays, and he hasn't played the last 4 games with a knee injury. But they are allergic to defense. It's amazing. They've been a little better in recent games, but I've watched some games this year. This is Duke, right? I mean, doesn't Coach K teach defense? He's the best coach in the country. And you just watch this team sometimes, you're like, man, what is happening there? But it's Duke. It's still not going to be an easy task for the Orange by any stretch when they had to Cameron on Saturday. So, every team that we could bring up, Villanova, Virginia, North Carolina, Duke, they all have flaws. They all have kind of that one weakness you can look at. But, boy, I think Carolina's in that conversation now. All right. So, tell you what, I think we'll wrap it up for tonight. Appreciate you guys hanging here. It's a heck of a game at the Dome tonight. It's unfortunate Syracuse couldn't grab that win, losing 78-74 to North Carolina. So Duke is next. We'll be right back here. If you haven't seen, it was a late till when they finalized the start time. So the Duke game will tip off. It's kind of an odd time. 6:15 tip-off on Saturday at Cameron Indoor Stadium. 6:15. So we'll be back here on Facebook Live after that game, about 8:30 or so, Saturday night. The Orange need it. They've got Duke, BC, Clemson left in the regular season, and they need some more quadrant one wins. They came oh so close to getting one tonight. Heck of an effort by the Orange tonight, but Theo Pinson too much, Joel Berry too much, Frank Howard shot, O'Shea Brissett's shot at the end doesn't go, turnover by Pascal Chukwu, just those little things that cost the Orange in what was a very entertaining game otherwise at the Carrier Dome tonight. Thanks for hanging with us here on Facebook Live. Appreciate that. Make sure you look for my recap on syracuse.com on Thursday and all of our great coverage. I want to thank our friends at the Bill Rapp Superstore for sponsoring this and our Syracuse Sports Podcast. We'll be talking a lot of bracketology in the podcast this week, including a conversation with Patrick Stevens, one of the best bracketologists in the country. So we will talk again Saturday after the Duke game. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us here on Facebook Live on syracuse.com.